Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another installment of our ABPMP CBOC chapter review. My name is Todd Lohr. I'm on the board of the International Board of Directors, and I'm happy to kick off the session today with one of our esteemed authors. Today we're going to cover Chapter 7 in the ABPMP CBOC process transformation. The author, Dan Morris and Nancy Bilodeau, put quite a bit of time a while back in creating the content for Chapter 7. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review that. Dan Morris is going to be presenting the chapter to us today. Dan is the managing principal for Wendon Consulting and has extensive experience in BPM throughout many different roles he's had in industry. Over the years, he's authored numerous books on the subject and has been an officer and member of ABPMP for quite some time as well. In addition, Dan works quite extensively with the Process Excellence Network and writes quite a few columns for them. So very excited to have Dan as an author and contributor to the CBOC, as well as with us to cover Chapter 7 today. For those that are new to these calls, we kicked off quite some time ago the new version, version 3 of the CBOC for ABPMP. As part of the kickoff for that, we've been doing monthly chapter overviews by the authors. As you see on the slide here, there were quite a few industry experts that contributed to the development of the CBOC, either by chapter as well as chapter introductions. We had review committees and full reviewers and editors of the content as well. So wanted to take the time today to have Dan provide an overview of Chapter 7, and we'll go from there. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dan, and Dan, please take it from there.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time to sit and be part of this session. Today we'll be looking at process transformation. And the CBOC, what we have right now on this screen is the table of contents for Chapter 7. And introduction and key concepts aside, today we'll be talking about transformation, going beyond improvement, the executive commitment that's necessary, change management, getting ready for process transformation, transforming the business, and then sustaining the state towards optimization that we're going to be reaching. We're finding that business transformation has become a critical part of the business operation, and it is critical not only from a cost reduction standpoint, which is an important takeaway. Business transformation is absolutely critical today for companies that want to gain a competitive advantage. The market is changing. Globalization is changing the way the world deals with business. And to move and take advantage of the opportunities, we now need to have a different kind of a business structure, business type of, beyond organization to infrastructure and how the company works and how it can change. And the only way you're going to get there is through transformation. But as we say on the right in that little blue box, it's not a straightforward activity. Today we'll be talking a little bit about how do we reduce risk, how do we create a foundation for success, and looking a little bit at how to execute larger scale BPM projects. One of the biases that I have, and I'll put on the table right up front, is the fact that you'll not be able to reach the speeds of change that are necessary, nor the reduction in risk that's necessary to not only transform but to sustain that transformation without adopting a BPMS-based BPM strategy and capability. Without that, you simply can't move fast enough, which has been a problem that companies have dealt with for the past 100 years. So now, moving on, I'd like to First of all, we have a little bit of a technical difficulty today. I don't know if it's showing up on your screens, but I keep getting this session timeout, and I'll just keep clicking off. So I do apologize for that little difficulty, but we can get through it without too much of a problem. Each of the chapters in the CBOC has a foreword written by an industry expert. Chapter 7, Chapter 7's foreword was written by Tony Benedict, who is the president of ABPMP. He's also a vice president with Scottsdale. That's not working well, so I am now back.
Okay.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me now. I do apologize for these technical problems that we're having, but we'll work our way through this. Okay, transformation, as I was saying, is something broad. It's fairly invasive. It's disruptive by nature, and because of that, it's fairly high-priced and fairly risky, but it can be controlled. Improvement, on the other hand, we look at as narrowly focused projects that will be within a given workflow, within a given business unit, and have a very limited objective. So really contrasting the two, what we're going to be doing today is really take the broader perspective and look at the transformation itself. And starting off with the question of why do you want to transform? I mean, why isn't improvement enough? What we're finding is that in most companies, continuous improvement, which you need to have, operational improvement, which you need to have, are focused efforts. And each of them, you can look at them like stars in the sky. Each of them is good in itself, delivers something unique in itself, but don't tie together. And so they don't help you move together towards changing the organization as a whole. They're great at fixing problems. They're great at making little improvements, but they don't help move the organization, the company, or a significant part of that company, or improve it as a whole. That's one of the reasons we say when we deal with the combined impact of short-term fixes. Say, you know, after a while you've got all these fixes, and they're great, but they really don't help you get to improved ability to compete or improved ability to move quickly in response to an opportunity. So one of the reasons you transform is to gain those advantages. Another one is to catch up with technology. An example of that today is dealing with social media. A lot of things are changing all over the country in every industry related to different types of social apps and the things that you can do with them and how that's really changing the way we interact with insurance, banking, hospitals, and the list goes on. So one of the reasons we transform then is to move up and take advantage of changes in technology. And one of the things we'll be talking about is changes that are now available based on BPMS-supported BPM technology. And then improving large parts of the business that may have not been changed for a while. And one of the things that we all know is that over time, any business operation will naturally evolve to mediocrity. There are a lot of different things happening in a business unit every day that happen in a fairly uncoordinated and uncontrolled manner. People figure out how to get the job done. And so every once in a while it becomes appropriate to look at the organization, look at what's going on, how it's going on, why it's going on, and then look at transforming it, making it more current. Which all means that this is more strategic in nature. It's not short-term. It's something that we'll talk about in a little while with commitment. It's something that really changes the ballgame, which in itself makes this not for the faint of heart. There are I'm getting a note here. Can you hear me? Todd, can you hear me?
Yes, Dan. Sound good.
Okay, because I just got a note that said call back in, people couldn't hear me. So, okay, hopefully that was something that took a
I think
while to
that's
come in. Okay,
previous, I
Todd,
think.
would you do me a favor if at any point in time you can't hear me, um, call me back on my cell phone and I'll switch again?
Yeah, will do.
Thank you. So we're finding that, this transformation, the very nature of transformation, is something that requires a lot of commitment. It's a large project. They're expensive. And they're really something that we need to get a good part of the organization engaged and involved in to make successful. And when I say a big part of the organization, it really is, you have to have the business operation. You have to have IT support. You really need, if you're a production organization, somebody that makes something, you need to get them involved. It's going to involve changing culture. But it also gives you the opportunity to really be innovative and to apply creativity to looking at how you want to deal with problems. And innovation is really important, and I would, although I'm sure there will be people who disagree, I believe that innovation really takes a different form at the transformation level than it does at the individual improvement level. Because when you start to deal with something more broad-based, you can have a much more significant impact through innovation than you can if you're very down low in the weeds. To be successful, we know that all transformation has to start with a new vision. Without that, it's just not going to work. You have to understand what you want this to be when it's finished. And that becomes what we call the outcome state design. So where is this going to go? Now, that outcome state design is not necessarily something that you're going to move to in one step. Transformation can be broken into multiple steps or segments and can be done over a given point in time. The key is, once you have the outcome state defined, it's like a puzzle. You now know what the end picture looks like, and you know what the pieces are. And you can take those pieces and pull them out in groups or rearrange them, and those become the segments. So as you move towards that transformation outcome state, you can do it in a way that builds it in chunks that you can bite off, that you can control, that you can fund, and you can time with the increased capabilities of technology to deliver those things that you need to have happen. So in looking at that, what are the realistic constraints? And, what levels do you need to really do this to make it happen? Which means any place except the low level. So the company level, the division level, the business unit level, the process level. All of those are candidates for transformation. Now, when we look at executive commitment, one of the problems that we have is that this is not short term. This is in it, you're in it for the long haul. And one of the issues that I've had to deal with in my professional life is a changing of the guard. When people who are sponsors leave, the new people come in and they may not have the same vision. They may not have the same appetite for the level of commitment and level of change that's underway. And I've seen a lot of even billion-dollar transformation efforts stopped. Doesn't mean they weren't succeeding, doesn't mean they weren't going in the right direction. What it does mean, though, is with the changing of the guard, you may wind up with a changing of priorities, a changing of how they want to spend money, and all of that can really have a very significant impact on your transformation effort. To the degree that you can get past that and get a long-term commitment from as high in the organization as you can, the better off you are. And for those who commit, you need people who will see it through, give you public support. Now, that's probably one of the most important things, is the public support, because the next item down is called the fad of the month. A lot of places try things, put slogans up, do a lot of different things, only to continuously change their focus, change what they're dealing with, and never carry anything through. You need to get that public support, convince people that it's going to be carried through. You also there will be people who disagree with the transformation effort, so you need your executive sponsors to defend you and to defend what's going on with the transformation itself. And this is one of the ways that you can get past the changing of the guard problem. The public support also gives you what you need to help align priorities in the transformation. You're going to find that within the different business units, everyone will have their own set of priorities, their own set of problems, their own set of funding issues, their own IT issues, all of the above and a lot more. So the question is, how do you then align these so that you can now get the support that you need within the business units for the transformation effort, recognizing they've got a lot of conflicting priorities, not only with one another, but with what you're trying to do in transforming. Change management, which we'll talk about in a minute, is one of the ways that we approach that, but aligning those priorities and aligning those people becomes a critical foundation step that's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, your project's going to have all kinds of disjointed starts and stops, and things just really won't tie together very well, and it just becomes a big mess. So building the consensus that's necessary through that public support, that public show of support, is an absolutely critical underlying commitment that you need to have in order to transform. Without that, no matter what you do, you're just not going to succeed. So those become very important. Within the groups that are going to be involved, you need to break down the communication barriers that exist in most companies. That's easier said than done, quite frankly. But you need to start having a collaboration, because everybody that's involved in a transformation effort will have some degree of interaction with everybody else that's involved from a production standpoint, from a performance and a processing standpoint. And so they're all part, to quote an old saying, they're all in the boat and they all have to row together, because if they row in different directions, they're not going to get anywhere. So it's important to get that collaboration going, to get everybody rowing together. To do that, though, also requires that people have an open mind. They have to be willing to break the mold of the past and do things differently. One of the key things in this, in moving in that direction, is performance management. Company after company that I've been into and helped move into performance management has a real problem with a lot of people who've never been evaluated other than by their supervisor, never been evaluated against standards, against performance criteria. When you start to measure people that way, you get a lot of resistance. And so, people have to have an open mind in looking at why you're doing this, what it's going to mean, and how it will, instead of beating them up, how it will help them improve their business operations so they can be evaluated better. So there's a whole lot that's involved in the executive commitment as a foundation that goes probably, I would say, farther than one would normally have in a different type of a change, whether it's an application development or a purchased application implementation or something of those natures. Now, in change management itself, what we are seeing is, we can classify or group change management into three categories. Strategic, what are those types of changes that are going to be essentially impact everybody in the business, and everybody will need to align to. Those that are operational, how can we make the operation optimal? How can we make it more effective, more efficient? And then in IT, what does IT have to change in order to support the business? Now, one of the questions I get a lot is, well, that's so what? Why is change management really all that important? The fact is that people are the key, and expectation is really how evaluation is going to take place, regardless of whether you have standards or not. You have to control those two things, and the way that you align that is really through formal change management projects and processes. And we oftentimes, start by workshops where we look at, here's what this transformation is really all about, and we bring in those managers at different levels that we know are going to be involved. And we try to bring them to a common perspective, which, is interesting when it starts out because it's all over the board. When we ask people, well, what's this transformation project all about? If we've got 10 people, we're going to get probably 12 different answers because a couple of them will think, well, it might be this or it might be that. By the end of those workshops, everybody needs to be aligned. They need to understand their roles. They need to understand, who, what, why, when, where, and how, and what they're going to be doing to make that happen. They also need to, understand the impact on people. There was a large auto manufacturer that I was involved in a few years ago that wanted to cut out 40% of their cost. And we said, well, why 40%? How'd you come up with that number? And they said, well, we think that's a good number. I said, okay, fine. Well, the teams that they had put in place to do that, they were told, now, we were brought in because this was failing. And the teams were told to reduce cost by 40%. And they were also told that no one on the teams were going to be protected and that they may very well wind up being part of the 40% cost reduction. And, it was easy to see that, these people just were not incented to make this happen because they're going to lose their jobs. So, we helped them look at the people side, which they hadn't considered at all, and help them look at controlling change and look at what was going on. We wound up getting the majority of those costs reduced over time, an acceptable time to them, through retraining programs and through essentially moratoriums on hiring people. If you needed somebody, we had a pool of people that we didn't need in a given business area anymore. Instead of being fired, those people were put in a pool, and they were then retrained and went to different areas of the company. And as soon as we started to do that, the participation changed completely, and the cooperation changed completely. So, change management and the way that you deal with people, the way that you apply technology to process can make all the difference in the world in making something succeed. We've talked about a few different things, and these are all parts, I should say, of what I'll call is setting the foundation, getting ready for process transformation. We'll be creating a change-ready operation, and to me, change-ready means that you have an organization that when you decide to make a move, can analyze, plan, and execute that move quickly with low risk and in a cost-effective manner. Putting that in place is something that is necessary for a lot of different organizations because companies typically don't have that capability involved. Now today, some companies that have been moving more and more to adopt BPM and BPMS strategies and approaches are building those bases, those foundations. We still have a lot of companies that are very much in early stages and don't have those in place yet. So one of the things looking at transformation that you really need to do is to put that type of environment in place. Now in doing that, funding is always a problem. It's a constraint. So when you start to look at, you now have your vision, you have your outcome model, you know what you want to do, you know where it's going. One of the constraints that helps you back off and define those segments is funding. So that's where that funding constraint really starts to come in, so that as you're looking at building those segments, you can put together a realistic funding model, and you know what you're going to get for the dollars that you spend in each segment, and you know how those then will help roll and build a foundation for the next step or the next segment as you start to move through the creation of these segments towards a transformed environment. We talked about the goals. Now, the resources becomes a significant issue. You're not going to transform by having people only from IT do it. You're not going to transform by having people from the business only do it. You're certainly not going to transform if you have a majority of the people being enterprise architects, nor business architects. What you need is a combination of all of those skills, all of those specialties that come in and are applied at different points in the project. Some overlap, but some are more specifically focused on certain parts of what's going on. But the bottom line is you need to have those different skills identified. You need to understand where you need to apply what at what given point in time, what the results are going to be, what you expect from them, how you're going to fund them, where are you going to get them, and how this is all then going to evolve and fit together when people come in, when they go out, when they come back in. So those become key things in building your foundation, and one of the reasons why I'm really big on methodologies, and not simply vendor-supplied methodologies, which are great for the technical side, but really don't do very much on the business side. You know, BPM is business transformation is primarily a business-driven activity. You can transform because you now have a system that you put in or are putting in a new system, a new ERP or in healthcare and HIS, but you're transforming around that. And what are you transforming? The business. If you put in a system, the best you can do from that system is to make things work a little more effectively, a little more efficiently. The system's not going to give you a competitive advantage. And, you know, the base that you need to move towards is that competitive advantage. And what's going to do that? Well, it's not the technology. What's going to do that is the business operation. How that business works, how it interacts with the customers, how it wants to work, and everything else, the technology and all that supports that. So in doing that, you need all these different perspectives. You know, you can't take an IT perspective, and you can't take simply a business perspective because there's social media and other things involved. And you can't just take a production perspective. So it takes a blending of those filtered through constraints, because IT will have constraints, so will business and production. And as you start to design those segments, backing up from this is what that outcome is going to be when we're done, you have to look at realistic estimates. I go into company after company that says they're failing simply because the people who put the estimates together told management what they thought management wanted to hear. And frankly, this is a big problem also that you're going to get with consulting companies. Underestimating kills you. It just kills you. And I would strongly suggest, that you estimate properly and that you are able to back up, justify, defend those estimates, and not just go with what you think people want to hear. You have to have reasonable scope. When you start to back off and define your segments, you have to look at what's involved in those segments, and the scope has to be something that can be delivered within the time frame that you need to deliver something in. And that allows you, those two things together allow you to control expectations. But again, to do this, firmly believe you have to have methodologies in place. If you're going to evaluate, you have to have standards in place. And so that you can get the speed that you're going to need to support the transformation, you have to have the right tools. Now, because a lot of these things will be new or evolving in a company, you have to take the time and spend the money on training. That's an area that a lot of companies I see just fall down on. They'll get a tool. I had one company that I was working in, just a ludicrous example. They wanted everybody to move to Six Sigma. So they had a training company come in, and the training course was classroom for 2 weeks, and then things beyond that. After the first day, this company went to the training provider and said, we don't have time to sit through this, so you have 2 days. So that trainer took that 2-week course down to 2 days, and all these people now thought they were Six Sigma experts. I didn't, but they thought they were. So realistic expectations are something, and preparing for success. Those people were not prepared for success, and they weren't succeeding. And you can see, when you start to look at the situation, you can see why. And you can see why all of these things become, it's not rocket science. When you look at it and something just seems like it wouldn't work, most of the time you're right, it won't. Now, enough of my preaching, and we'll start to get at, reaching optimization. Well, one of the things that, we look at is a win-win outcome. You can pretty much bet on the fact that if there's going to be somebody who is a loser in the transformation, A, they're going to fight you every step of the way, and B, they're going to do whatever they can to make this thing fail. Everybody who's involved has to win. If they don't, you've got some real problems that you have to deal with. Now, Todd, did you start to say something? Okay. I thought I heard somebody on the line. One of the things as a foundation that people need to understand are the strengths, the weaknesses, the limitations, the problems of the legacy business operation and the legacy technology. You need to understand what you're dealing with. You can't just go right into, here's the new business model. When you look at the outcome model, that's in a sense saying this is where it's going to be. But as you start to then move through the segments, you have to look at how those segments are going to change, how they're going to evolve the legacy operation. How are you going to tie into it? When are you going to replace a given piece of the business operation or a given system or a given capability? And that all factors in. And that's one of the reasons with the composite teams. The changes, whether they're limitations or understanding the problems, the compliance requirements on the business side, really take people who understand the business operation. Looking at the legacy portfolio of applications, the constraints, the infrastructure constraints, you really need to have someone like an enterprise architect. So as you're looking at these things, as you're evaluating these things, you apply the appropriate skills, the appropriate resources at the appropriate points. Pull in that information and go through a normalization process where you can make sure that those things coming from each of these groups can be understood by all the other groups. Now, the BPMS, there are a wide range of business process management suites. Some of them have a lot more capability than others. Some are harder to use than others. And just about anything you can think of, some are better or worse than others. Once you have a BPMS in-house, I like to think that you are going to stick with it. Some companies have 3 or 4 of them in-house. I've been to some large organizations where they have multiple BPMSs, in which case you have the freedom to use the one that best fits your needs. One of the things, though, with standards that you need to consider is putting standards in place that will allow you to then integrate whatever models and whatever information you collect at any given point in time with what other teams are going to be collecting that are part of the same overall project. So that as you pull these together, you have one model that everybody understands that works together, and one set of information, whether it's on, performance metrics or compliance metrics, that everything will fit together. So your standards and your requirements for performance become absolutely critical if, in fact, you want all of this stuff to be able to, give you one consistent view across the scope of the project. Now, in redesigning the operation, in other chapters we've talked about how do you redesign, what's involved in that. So I'm not going to go into that in great detail. I can certainly talk to anybody if you're interested. Give me a call or send me a note and we can get into detail on that. But the redesign operation essentially is where you start to look for innovation, where you start to look for how you can do things better. You look for what we call breakpoints. You look for redundancies, and the list goes on and on. And again, that's in a different chapter in the CBOC. The redesign, however, should be, again, once you have that end state in mind, the redesign becomes a design of multiple segments, and the redesign becomes a way that you then move through those segments, delivering different things along the way so that you can show a growing benefit. Now, leveraging technology is an important part of any redesign. I like to tell people that, leveraging technology is not talking about the technology that you have in-house today. You have to start there. But you also then need to look at, as an example, if you're not using cloud technologies, somebody should be looking at the fact, can that be leveraged a year, 2 years from now, whatever? Can that be leveraged to help you? If you're not using much social media today, how can that be leveraged? And what segment should you then put that into? Because you have to bring those skills and bring the technology in-house in order to allow you to do those things. So you can, once you understand where you are with the technology, working with the enterprise architects, you can then lay out how that technology is going to evolve. You can align that evolution then to your segments in your transformation and look at how you can then leverage that state of technology in the company at that point in time to that redesign. Of course, I like iteration and simulation. I look at the need to simulate as being important. Some people don't. I do. From the standpoint that if I take a design and I've now built in all the performance criteria, I can then simulate the operation under that design in a type of model office environment. And I can see exactly what works and what doesn't work. And I can then make sure that what I deliver meets all of the business and the technical requirements. So to me, simulation, and then to the degree that I don't meet the standards and the objectives in any simulation, I iterate and then resimulate until we get it right. So those two things are BPM and BPMS enabled, and there's something that I would strongly suggest that you take advantage of, because they do help change the game and change the probability of success. We've talked a little bit about performance monitoring. We've talked a little bit about delivering flexibility. And now we'll get into sustaining optimization. And the first thing that I want to do is to be controversial. And for those that know me will say, well, that's nothing new. But I would submit that in the past, it has been absolutely impossible to optimize anything. And the reason is that the world is changing in so many different ways, constantly, at different rates. And some of the rates are very fast. So, first of all, what does optimization mean in that type of a situation? Secondly, what does it mean to you as part of an overall corporate environment? Because optimization within your part of the business may have a different definition than in another part of the business. So, okay, what does it mean, first of all? And then, second of all, you can't optimize, you can't hit that definition until you have the ability to move quickly. And until you have the foundation that we've been talking about, you can't move quickly. When you have to find a problem, figure out what that problem is all about, put in a request to IT then for some type of systems change, wait to get scheduled, then 6 months or more to build it, and then another couple months to run it through all of the paces to get it working properly. Whatever you're putting in place is a minimum of 6 to 8 months behind. The world and the business have changed. So you couldn't optimize. Today, and this is one of the reasons I call myself a BPM evangelist, is that today, for the first time, I can start to look at moving fast enough through the environment that we're talking about based on BPMS technologies and other types of technologies that are available. We can now move quickly enough where I can change fast, and I can change very low cost, and I can change with a very high level of assurance of success, very low risk. When I can do that, I can now start to move quickly towards optimization, and recognizing that the world's changing even as I'm moving quickly. And so what I'm going to do is to get close to it. And then I'm going to continue to evolve, which is what I look at continuous improvement as mainly being about in this context. I can now start to look at optimization, and I can now keep changing that definition of optimization, and I can keep evolving towards that new definition, changing the business organization. But the key is I have to learn from my mistakes. I have to have a collaborative environment, and I have to have the right infrastructure in order to do that. And when I can do that, and I have the right feedback mechanisms in place, I can really now, for the first time ever, start to move very closely to that optimized model. And through the continuous improvement applied in this context, I can now sustain that level of optimization. So now we're about out of time, and this is my summary slide. We've talked about the proper foundation, corporate culture, that change management's an important piece that shouldn't be, disregarded. Right now, change management in most companies, or at least a lot of companies, is an orphan, something people talk about, but they don't really do. Collaboration, as we talked about, is important by bringing everybody together so that you have that composite view and the availability of those different skills that you're going to need, the tools to allow you to create this environment that we've been talking about, methodology, BPMS, a common set of terminology, standards, that needs to be in place, and we need to start to put together that foundation in order to support the type of evolution and the move to optimization that we're talking about. But through all of that, we now have to have the appropriate level of governance, which is why I suggest that people become involved in putting together BPM centers of excellence, which is where the standards reside and where the governance control resides for transformation efforts. Once we have that in place, we're now in a position to move very aggressively, very quickly to optimize the business and transform the overall operation itself. That concludes my discussion today, and as I said, this paper or this presentation will be out on the ABPMP website. I've also just completed a paper, if anybody's interested, called Evolving to Optimization. And if you give me a call or send me a note, I'll be happy to send you that paper. The paper is going to be published on PEX, and as soon as it's published, I'll be able to send it out. So now we'll start to look at questions. I have a few questions from Fokian. First of all, why do I separate IT from the operations? The reason I separate the two is that although to some degree I need to change them together, strategically I need to deal with them differently. Strategically, once I put my business strategy together, I can at that point look at my IT strategy and I can start to say, how do I want it to evolve? What are those capabilities going to be and when are they going to be there? On the other hand, I look at my business operations separately and I say, what marketplaces do I want to be in? How do I want to be in that marketplace? What do I want to do? And then I bring the two together and I say, if I'm going to do this on the business side, looking at the IT evolution, what can I do, and do I need to start looking at changing that business or that IT capability? So I separate the two because they're different disciplines, but you do have to look at them together and you do have to bring them together. And IT is ultimately both driven by business and constrained and provides constraints on the business. Okay. And again, with any of these, I'll be happy to go into more detail. Just send me a note or give me a call. Disagreements are also welcome because I love the debates. Learn a lot from the debates. I think we all do. How long does a change management effort that spans the whole organization may take? How long? Well, it depends on what you mean by a change management effort. If you're talking about transformation efforts take a fair amount of time, simply because you have to consider how much change an organization as a whole can take at any given point in time and how you want to do that. That's one of the reasons I don't suggest moving right from where you are now to that end state model that we had talked about, and why I look at moving through a series of segments to get to that. It could take, if you wanted to do a big bang, it could take a year. If you wanted to do it in a way that is more cost effective, more likely to be absorbed by the organization, you may double that time. So a lot of it takes, it's just, another wild card in there is, do you have a BPMS in? If you don't, it's going to take you 6 months to get ready. So it just depends is unfortunately the answer to that on a lot of variables. Um, does process optimization require trial and error? Yes. Or some sort of mathematical optimization solution, um, particularly for complex processes. The mathematics become involved in looking at, in my opinion, the analysis, evaluating different things. I look at business transformation, especially optimization, is iterative, which by nature means trial and error. I look at innovation as a trial and error process. You have an idea, and then let's now see what it does. So I look at the trial and error, the iteration, as a key component, and any mathematics as something that supports the evaluation of that iteration. Problem is when you have a BPMS previously of understanding the mission, vision, and okay. The problem is when you have BPMS previously understanding the mission. I'm not sure what this question is asking me from the wording of it. Fernando, I apologize for that. Okay, I have another one here from Fernando. Okay. Fernando, if you could maybe reword this. The problem is when you have a BPMS, I don't understand what you're asking me. So go on here to Juan Carlos. Oh, well, thank you, Juan. Let's see, we're back here. Okay, I'm waiting for other questions to come in. And while I'm waiting, for those of you who may have to drop off, thank you for joining me today. I truly appreciate the chance to talk to you. As you probably have gathered, I'm kind of passionate about this, and it's something I definitely believe in, and have helped a lot of companies move through. And thank you for those who are sending thank you notes. I appreciate that. Fernando, if I would ask you to send me something to my email address, and I do want to answer your question. I just unfortunately don't understand it. So please do either call me or send me a note. I'd be happy to become involved. And finally, I do want to encourage everybody, send me a note. I'll be happy to send you my new paper. It's about a new approach to reaching optimization. It addresses a lot of the problems, a lot of the things that people are dealing with today. So let's see, I have one. Any tactics on convincing the difference between, there's between ERP and BPMS. You know, a lot of ERP vendors try to masquerade themselves as BPMS, but they're not. Some of them are based on BPMS technologies. They have it embedded in them. Like SAP had, I think it had Savion embedded in it. I may be wrong, but it has a BPMS embedded in it. A lot of them do. That doesn't, because you have a BPMS embedded in your ERP, does not make it an ERP. I'm sorry, does not make it a BPMS. I'm sorry, I misspoke on that. There's a world of difference between the two. BPMS systems allow you to put any type of business models, and it's supported by business rules, supported by some other information that you need to put in, and then generate applications. Now, conceptually, what you're doing in the ERPs is using similar capabilities within the framework of the ERP. And that's the big difference, within the framework of the ERP. And then some of the better ones will take those and generate the applications or pieces of the applications at least. A lot of the ERPs are limited in what they'll allow you to generate and thus what they'll allow you to do. And they won't allow you to go outside of the framework of the ERP. As an example, if you buy an ERP module, and say you get the HR module, well, now you want to do manufacturing. You can't use it for that. You know, so if I have a BPMS and I put my HR operation in my BPMS, and then I want to do manufacturing, and then I want to do sales, and then I want to do whatever, I can do them all. Where with the ERP, I have to buy different modules, and I then have to stay within the confines of those modules. So those are some of the differences, Joseph. Not all of them, but at least some of them. I'm willing to continue to talk here if anybody is interested in. I'll keep going on these questions and stay on the line until you need to drop off. Let's see. Fernando, the problem is when there is a BPMS implementation in an organization and before any reflection on what is effectively BPMS implementation, or any reflection on what effectively process management. And my note cuts off there. Again, Fernando, the note cut off, it's a technical difficulty, and I can't see anything on my note below effectively. I think it's process management after that. Please, you know, I hate to do this to you, but send me an email and we can take care of that. Okay. Okay, process management, which corresponds to our version of ABPMP on BPM. Okay, I have other notes here. Okay. I think I'll be, let's see. Okay. Well, Fernando, please either call me or send me some notes and we'll take care of this. Others, thank you all for joining me, and since it's now 3:05, we did have a little glitch getting started, so didn't run over too much. Thank you all, and join us again next month for Tony Benedict